one more minute. Looks like we've got a couple more people coming in, then we'll get started. Hopefully I did that correctly. We want to have random music going throughout. Guys, thank you so much for coming in today. My name is Allison Keith. I'm a 7th grade English teacher at Agora Cyber Charter School. I know that you guys had so many amazing presentations that you could have gone to today, so I really appreciate that you're here to talk about games and gaming with me. One of the things that I do a lot as a cyber educator is try to motivate students who are not in the same room with me. They're students who, for some reason, have some reason that they feel that education in their previous environment was something very difficult for them. That could have been bullying, that could have been a learning disability, that could be that they're awesome on a TV show or training for the Olympics or doing something really cool. But there are readers that come into my class who don't necessarily feel like they can learn sometimes. Now, one of the things that I don't spend a lot of time talking about with my students is my secret identity, but I would like to take a minute just to share that with you guys in class, which is that every Thursday night, I transform from the perky, but still kind of cool, English teacher in front of you to this nerd right here. So in my personal life, I do play a lot of video games, and I'm friends with a lot of people who are actually game developers. So they make their own games, they play test their own games, and this has always sort of been like a really fun release for me. It's something that I used a lot of times to get through the stress of the day as a teacher, but I was not in the huge gamification camp. I sort of missed that boat, and so was very unfamiliar with a lot of the things that were happening in education around gamification. I have since become a lot more interested in gamification as a topic, but one of the things that I saw over and over again when teachers were gamifying was this constant struggle of, I built this game, it's really cool, and I still have like those 10 kids who are not interested in playing the game. Like, for whatever reason, they're just like not motivated, they're not interested, they don't think it's fun, even though I'm using all these really great game design principles. And this is one of the things that I saw a lot of times when I was play testing for many of my friends, right? They were always talking about balancing games and making sure that it appealed to different kinds of players. And that's what I want to talk to you guys today about, is sort of how can I use some of these game design principles as a way to balance games for students in our classrooms as well. So in order to do that, we're going to talk about 3 things. The first one, for those of you who do gamify already, is sort of defining game and game mechanic in a very particular way. And we need that definition of game mechanic to look a certain way because I want to talk to you about something called Bartle's taxonomy of players. And basically what this is it's a framework for understanding the different kinds of players and what motivates them to succeed in classrooms. I always think of classrooms as already a game space, whether we call it that or not. And so we'll talk about in sort of our last section how we can use Bartle's taxonomy to inform the game mechanics in our classroom, whether we're gamifying or not. So if we're going to talk about what a game is, and we're going to talk about how to gamify, and we're going to talk about game mechanics, we should play a game together. Really, really easy one though, nothing crazy. Our game is tic-tac-toe. So if you have the presentation open on your device right now, you can click the link that is available to play a quick round of tic-tac-toe. If you do not, and you have a piece of paper and a partner, you can quick play a round. If not, just play one in your head. We've played this game before. But I want to make sure that we're familiar with tic-tac-toe because this is going to help us to talk about the framework of game and game mechanic. So take about 30 seconds and just play a couple rounds. About another 10 seconds. It's just against a computer, so there's no pride on the line here today. All right, and let's go ahead. Just sort of finish up your current round and we can come on back. Just to take a quick poll of the room. Did anybody win against the computer?
Yeah.
Okay. Did anybody lose against the computer? No judgment. No judgment. Did anybody tie? Okay, a lot of us. Notice that we had lots of different people in all three outcomes. And one of the biggest things that I worry about when I hear definitions of what a game is that many people talk about a game as something that necessarily has to have a winner or a loser. And tic-tac-toe is the perfect way to talk about that not being the case, right? Because there's three outcomes. You can win, you can lose, you can also have a stalemate. So a game is really a defined experience with an interactive system, right? In the case of the marvelous tic-tac-toe, right, that system is defined as the board, right, our crosshatch, and then we have as many moves as we can make on that board until it is full. That has to be the end of the game. So it's a defined experience, right? It can't go beyond the bounds of the game. The second thing that we need to talk about is what a game mechanic actually is. And a game mechanic is an interaction between the player and the game. It's made up between the player's choice. This is really important for when we're talking about classrooms, that choice, and the game's feedback. So you have to have a choice as a player in order for it to really be a mechanic, right? In tic-tac-toe, the only choice that I can make is where I'm gonna put my X. The game, if I'm playing against a computer, is gonna give me an O, and I'm gonna have to respond to that choice. If I'm playing against another player, they're gonna put their O, and we have to respond to that choice until the game is done. But my choice is where to put that X. And game mechanics are really how we teach people to play our game, whether that is a classroom setting or whether that is, God of War, right? Some of you may know this movie. I love this movie. So this is War Games, 1983 movie, and in it, David Lightman, who's pictured on our screen, teaches an AI intelligence, Joshua, that about the futility of nuclear war using the mechanics of a game. And the way that Joshua is able to learn this information is by playing like hundreds of thousands of versions of tic-tac-toe and realizing that there are some situations in which choices are unwinnable, right? That some games cannot be won. We also see teaching in a very common game that we see, Chutes and Ladders. So Chutes and Ladders was actually based on a Sanskrit Buddhist game called Snakes and Ladders. And it was originally used to teach young acolytes about how to achieve enlightenment, which is very, very cool. Basically, the premise of the game in Snakes and Ladders was exactly the same. You rolled, not a dice, it was kind of like a very long stick that had like different choices on it, right? Numbers and moves. So you would roll that, and it was up to chance where your little piece would move along the board. And what the monks would use to do is to teach that the only choice that you have in life sometimes is just to keep rolling the dice, just to keep trying. Because the only choice, the only mechanic that this game actually has is the ability to choose to roll the dice. Everything else is up to chance. Think about our classroom spaces. Think about the other games that we play. How many choices do players get to make and how much feedback are they getting back? Even in a simple game like this, there's a lot to be taught. So when we're talking about game mechanics, right, there are two things that we have to take away, okay? A mechanic needs to have a player's choice, and it needs to have feedback that comes from the system. Sometimes that feedback isn't going to be happy. Like if you land on a snake, right? That doesn't make you happy in a game. If you play the game Celeste, for example, a really fun platformer game that's out right now, it's a game that's designed to frustrate you because it's trying to simulate an experience with mental health. So games aren't necessarily always happy, but they're always instructional because of the feedback nature of mechanics. In our classroom spaces, I think this is something that we've kind of touched on, is that our classrooms are already a defined experience, right? Students come into our classroom for a school year, for a period, and they make choices about how they interact with our classroom. Everything from where are they going to be sitting, who are they going to talk to, are they going to choose to raise their hand, are they going to choose to participate? And one of the things that we used to talk a lot about when we were doing game design, sort of with a lot of my friends, is a frustration point. That many players, when they felt that the game wasn't giving them choices, would get very frustrated and just decide not to play. because it goes back to snakes and ladders. If we feel like the only choice that we have to make in a game is whether to play or not, that's a very limiting option. And so if we're trying to build classrooms that are motivating, that include a lot of people, we need to make sure that we're giving a lot of choices for how our players are able to interact, right? If the only choice is our ability to interact or our ability to sort of frustrate out and not be interested, then a lot of students are going to choose not to engage. So now I want to get to the meat of my lovely talk today, which is Richard Bartle. I love Richard Bartle. He was a researcher in the 1980s. He graduated from the University of Essex with a degree or a doctorate in artificial intelligence, artificial design. And he worked primarily on MUDs. Some of you maybe have heard of MUDs before. I had not, because I am a youngie. And so MUDs are these really interesting text-based games. And I think if you handed a MUD to many of the students that we work with today, they'd be like, this is not that interesting, guys. There's no cool graphics. Like, basically, it's a text adventure. So you write in something into the text, and the text spits something back out with you. But these were wildly popular. I mean, wildly popular. There were articles written about how MUDs were like killing people's brains and like all of this like supposition by people about why it was that a MUD was so addicting. And Richard Bartle, being a researcher, was like, I should do some research on this. Like, I'm really interested in figuring out why it is that people find my game so fascinating. So he starts doing a lot of research around game mechanics, around can I find that thing, that one mechanic, or maybe even a series of mechanics that is motivating these players, that is really holding their attention. And he was disappointed, right? What he found was that he couldn't find just one mechanic that worked for every player. But what he was able to find was a series of mechanics that kind of grouped together into types. And we call this in the industry Bartle's taxonomy. They're groups of players that are all sort of motivated by the same kinds of mechanics. And when you're thinking about balancing a game, when you want your game to be the kind of thing where someone can come in and find a choice that interests them for how to participate, you want to know what these are. So to help with this, I developed a little quiz that you can take. I figured we will take like 5 minutes or so for us to go ahead and work with it here. This is also linked in the documents for my presentation, and so you can take this here. We'll talk about some of the results, but you can also give it to your students as well. hand raise who needs another minute. Okay, give another minute. I know a couple of people have said it's sort of like spinning, like it's slow today. I have a feeling that once you see the types, you'll be able to identify yourself. For the most part, people are pretty good. These are based on reflection questions, and actually there are several people who have done duplicates of Bartle's research. One of them developed a quiz that was specifically designed for players, and it's very exclusively used by sort of video game industry, like Niantic, I know has used it a bunch. I know that Nintendo was using it for a while. I looked at those questions and said, these don't really make sense in the course of a classroom, right? Because a lot of the things that they were interested in didn't really fit our needs. And so was interested in finding what do those mechanics look like in the classroom and develop those questions based on that. All right. Ready to talk about some types? All right, let's do it. All right, so let's take a quick minute to talk about what these 4 types are. Now, when Bartle first did his research, he gave different names than I have up here on the board. He actually did them with Suits of a Playing Card. The industry then began changing these names, and I have all of the correct names except for one. You guys should know, because you are educators and may want to do research on this on your own, that the technical term for kings is player killers. I do not believe that that is an appropriate term to use in the classroom. I'm sure that you will all agree with me. So I use kings, and I also think that kings is a better determiner for what it is that these kinds of players really want to be and how they define success. So let's take a quick poll. Does anybody want to show us how many of us were kings? Couple? How about achievers? How about socializers? How about explorers? I'm always really interested when I do this with educators, because achievers and explorers, we always get a ton, and then it's my special kings and my special socializers that are really interested in being in education. So basically what this chart shows us is how each of these different kinds of players define success. Okay, that's what this is. It's a definition for success and succeeding. You'll see that on the chart, there's 2 axes, right? Our vertical axis shows that players want to succeed with versus succeed against, okay? And then players and the game. So our achievers are very interested and motivated by mastery. They want to succeed against the game, okay? That means that they want to get the high score in the game. They want 100% game completion. They want to know that they finished it, right? They are the characters who are very interested in maxing out character stats, like those experience points, gold, power levels, all that kind of stuff. They want to have the most. It really is truly an achievement for achievement's sake. And the 2 things that really frustrate achievers are mechanics where they cannot see their progress. So anytime that they can't see that they are achieving, they get really, really frustrated because they can't see themselves succeeding. So you need that visible. They also get very frustrated by other players impeding their progress. Think about that kid who hates to do group work because Sally's really slow, and they want to finish it and they want to get that 100%. Okay, so our achievers are motivated by mastery of the game. Their goal is to succeed against the game. They want to beat the game itself. As opposed to our explorers. Our explorers are motivated by novelty and curiosity. They want to succeed with the game, using it as a tool. So these are our players that I always think of the game Minecraft as perfect for explorers. Because yes, there is technically a way to like kill an ender dragon at the end and get some like winning for if you are that achiever type. But this is a game that's perfect for explorers because you define your definition of success. You find those hidden areas or elements. You're delighted by discovery and surprises and Easter eggs, things that game developers have hidden for you to find if you go off and you play the game correctly. They want to explore the whole map. They don't want to just take a look at one particular area and sort of follow the progression of the game, right? If anybody ever played Legend of Zelda, they were very frustrated by like the gated problem of getting around to the different temples. When they want to see what is in a new area, they want to see what's in a new area just to see it, right? They also want to test out ideas for something that should work because that's how they define success. Can I really build an entire castle out of jack-lanterns? Can I? Like, is that something that I can do in Minecraft? That's my definition of success. I feel like the rules of the game should allow me to do it, so I'm gonna try it. Think about that student in your classroom who's like, hey, so I know that we have this project and you gave us a list of requirements. I'd like to do it this way, and I think it will fit the requirements, but you know that they're twisting things just a little bit in order to hit some sort of novelty or something that they're really personally interested in. These are our explorers, and they dislike two things: restriction, so the inability to make choices that impede their ability to define success, right? They don't want their project to look like everybody else. They don't want their learning to look like everybody else's. They're motivated by novelty, and if what you're going to produce out of that project is going to be a cookie cutter response that looks like everybody else's, they're not interested. So restricted choices. The inability, well, the other one is lack of choices, right? So the inability to think about how they can interpret the materials that you give, right, to sort of their own benefit or their own interest. They always want things to be very, very personal in class. Then we have our socializers. Socializers are motivated by a sense of community and belonging. They want to succeed with other players, okay? In sort of a game context. These are the players that really like a regular game night. They love being a part of something. These are the players who are really awesome about helping new players play. They do not care if you're a noob. They want a bigger group. They will walk you through the steps of character creation in D&D. Like, these are the sort of champions in many ways of the gaming industry. They love to have discussions in their personal and online time about the game. So one of the things that they'll really enjoy doing is they are the people who write on those comment threads. They want to have discussions outside of something to sort of move through a different, to bolster sort of the community itself. And they really like novelty, but they like novelty for a different reason than our explorers do. They like novelty so that they can bring something back to the group and be, aha, look what I found. I'm a part of this group. I have a job, I have a role, I have something that I can contribute. I don't have to be the best player, but I do have to be a member of this community. And feeling like a member of the community is really what motivates them to succeed. The two things that they don't like is a lack of belonging, so an environment that is too cutthroat. If they feel like the environment really only values the people who are the best at everything, then they're gonna say, you know what, I think this isn't the environment for me. I shouldn't even try if the only thing that my community values is being the best. They also like when they feel like they don't have anything unique to contribute. So these are players that really like those sort of community games where everybody has a role. If you've got like a healer and a DTS and all that kind of stuff, they love that because they can get really, really good at one thing and they don't have to be good at every single thing to still feel like a member of the group. The last one are my kings. And in a lot of the literature around gaming, this group, I feel like, gets the most maligned, but I actually think is in many ways the easiest to motivate because they're really motivated by winning. They want to succeed against other players, right? But that also means that this is a group that likes rigor. They love challenge, right? If everybody in the class can get an A, that A doesn't mean anything, right? They want that class ranked so they know I'd rather be in fourth knowing that I have X many slots to get to the top than a situation where I can't tell how people are ranked, okay? So they love player rankings. They love inter-player competition. They love specialized awards like MVP or the play of the game, right? In my classroom, we do the star student, right? You do something really cool, you can work for that. And for the class period, you're the best. And they love that, they're motivated by it. They also like specialized roles that sort of show that they are tiered above other people, right? Like they love being team captain and sort of building up those leadership capacities. They just like when games are too easy and anyone can do it. If anyone can do it, then I shouldn't do it. And typically speaking, those are the students that will disengage with the game when they feel like there's almost too much access to it. Or inability to see progress, and I put in parentheses, their way. Right? Remember, for them, progress is measured against other players, not against completion of the game, right? And so they want to be able to see, how am I ranking? How am I building skills next to other players? So coming back to this chart, right? Each one of these different kinds of players are motivated by something in this quadrant. And our question is, how do we keep this in mind in our classroom? Because our classrooms, as we already talked about, are already a game space, right? They're a defined experience where players make choices and they get feedback. So that means that we have students who are walking into our classrooms who have one of these kind of engagement types with the material that we give them. And very often I have found that, at least for myself, I was an achiever. And so I had built a very achiever-style classroom. I assumed that all of my students would be motivated by the things that motivated me, by my definition of success, and that really wasn't the case, right? I had kings in my classroom, I had socializers, I had explorers, and I hadn't built mechanics into the way that my classroom ran to make those students feel successful, and their definitions of success were just as valid as mine. So, when we're talking about a non-gamified classroom, right? What are just some things that we can think about for those students, for the mechanics that we have that are gonna help those students to feel successful, right? For achievers, it's actually kind of easy because I feel like school is already set up for achievers, right? You can earn an A, you can win school, right? You can get the highest grade. You can be able to answer every question. Think of that student who always has to be the person with their hand up, right? And they want you to call on them every single time. That is an achiever, right? Complete the assignment independently and perfectly, right? They don't want to have to do it with their friends because their friends might mess them up, right? They also want to hear good job from their teachers because you, as the teacher, you're part of the game too. You are the conscience, you are the AI, right, to your classroom game. And so when you say good job to them, right, they're gonna hear that as, I've beaten the game, right, I've won, the teacher really liked me. Kings, on the other hand, they like to have the highest rank in the class. They like to be able to answer the tough questions that not everybody else can answer. They need rigor in order to make sure that they can feel successful. They like to complete assignments independently and often faster than others, right? These are the ones who want to beat everybody, right? And they don't always do a thorough job because they're trying to be the first person to finish an assignment. They like to hear from their teacher, you're the best, right? You won today. You did better than other people, because for them, that's the only way that they can feel successful, right? Is that beating the game isn't enough. It actually has to be sort of a ranked situation. On the other side of the spectrum, we have those socializers, right? They like having specific roles that they can take on in the classroom and feel good at, right? I had one student 2 years ago, and this student liked to read the class motto every single day, right? He was not the smartest student in my class. He was not the student who was ever gonna finish assignments first. But because he got on and he read the class motto in a different accent or a funny voice or something that made the rest of the students laugh, he felt like he'd contributed that day. And so he was much more interested in doing the things that were a part of the class group because he felt like he had something that was his in the classroom. They like to feel like they're a part of a good class, right? So these are the groups that if they feel like they're hearing all the time about their classmates, man, this class just like didn't do it today. Like we did not have a good day, class. This was not our best day. They take that very personally, right? Like it's an affront on them because their identity is part of being part of that good class. So we have to be very careful with our language around these types of players. They like to work together to solve challenging problems. Notice that's very different than our kings and our achievers, right? They love to be in a group because that's what helps them to feel successful. So when we think about balancing games, right? Most games that are built, think of big D&D, World of Warcraft, right? These big multi-online player games. There are lots of different ways for players to interact because we have to balance these different types. We need to find experiences where socializers are going to get to feel like they're a part of a party or a part of a group, and that's why that particular strategy has been used so often, right? You can be in a group, but you can still be the best DTS character or the best healer, right? So thinking about how can our group work have roles so that our socializers can still get the benefit of being able to socialize, but our characters or our students, right, that are those kings and are achievers and are maybe a little more wary of working with others, have something else that they feel like they can be successful as well. They like to hear thank you, not from their teacher, but from their classmates. Because you, the teacher, you're part of the game, right? And they don't really care about the game, actually. They care about the players. So they want to hear appreciation that comes from the other members of the class. So how are we facilitating that in our classroom? Finally, we have our explorers, right? Explorers like to be able to define success for themselves. They like being able to answer their own questions about a subject, right? And being given the opportunity to do inquiry-based learning. They like to work together to solve creative problems because they're going to find people who are like-minded, who are interested in the same questions, and that's going to help them solve them faster. And they love to hear good idea from their classmates, right? Your idea was interesting, it was novel, it was creative, because that's the thing that they really value. So, this lovely quiz that I gave to you is something that you can use in your own classrooms. We are going to get to the part where we talk about how to use this in gamification specifically. But that's one of the big places that you can use it is with student grouping. So making sure that when you do student grouping, are you thinking about how do students value success differently? Do you want to put all of the kings together one time and give them an activity where they're allowed to compete and they're allowed to be competitive? Or is it better in some activities to make sure that you have an even distribution because you want to make sure that in every group there's that socializer who's going to make sure that whoever is feeling new or maybe feeling like they're struggling with the material has somebody to go to. You can use it for student reflection. This is one of the things that I do with my students at the beginning of the year. I have them take this quiz and then reflect on if school was a game, how are you playing? Do you feel like this definition represents you? Sometimes they say no, right? Sometimes they say, you know what, this maybe does represent how I play Fortnite, but it doesn't represent who I want to be in the classroom. I want to be another type. How can we practice those skills, okay? It can also be a great inspiration for choices, right? So if you're putting together a choice board or an activity that's going to have a whole bunch of different components, thinking about these definitions of success is a good way to do it. I always need that help as a teacher, sort of saying to myself, okay, I know that I want the students to create something using technology, but can they create something that allows them to talk to one another? Can they create like a feed for one of my activities? And can my other group create some sort of competitive game? Can my other group create some sort of, work on some sort of checklist item where they can get all the way to the end? Can another group be working on an inquiry-based project that's based on that? So how can you use that to help give different choices to your players in the classroom? And this is the next part. Using it to troubleshoot activities or specifically gamified units and to really target how you're fixing them. So if you are someone that does gamification and you find that there are groups of players or certain students that are just sort of never participating, and often when you talk to students about participation, you kind of get meh from them. Like, why aren't you participating? Like, this is really fun. Like, isn't this cool? They're like, no, not really into it. This isn't really fun. They can't necessarily verbalize the fact that they don't feel successful playing that game. And for the most part, when people don't want to play a game, that's the reason they feel like they can't be successful in it. This is a good way to troubleshoot. So these are some questions that you can ask sort of yourself or even ask your players as they're playing in order to see what you can add to sort of help scaffold this experience for them. So for Kings, how do my students know how they compare to other players? Do my students feel like it's possible for them to get better results, right? If they feel, maybe you have a ranking, but we don't give the student a way to feel like they can make their results go up and down. And so they don't feel empowered to change their ranking so that they can do better. Do my students feel like their individual achievements will be recognized if they win? If they do something really cool or they win this game, are they going to get anything out of it? If they're not. They're maybe not going to be motivated. For achievers, how can my students see how much progress they're making in the game? Right? So in what way can they see, you know what, there are 10 badges that I can earn in this unit. Can I see myself slowly marking that off? Because that's like really satisfying to them. Can my students see and display their own achievements in some way, right? Is there some way to personalize that achievement? Do my students feel like it's possible to accomplish everything in the game? I built a whole RPG unit for The Hobbit last year, and it was really, really fun, and it had all of these choices, and it was amazing, and I had a bunch of achievers who were not interested in playing, and the reason that they didn't want to play was they felt like they couldn't do everything. I had made too many choices, right? Like, if there was no way for them to beat the game, because there was so much that you could possibly do, and I needed to think about the scope of what I was asking them to do in the classroom. There were just too many side quests, because I wanted to hit everyone. I was trying to be everything to all players, and you can't be that. Sometimes you have to make compromises in order to make sure that everyone can feel successful. Socializers, right? How does my game make students feel like they belong, where they have something personal to offer, right? So what role can these students actually inhabit in the classroom? Can my students count on the game to be a regular source of positive interaction with socialization? Is this something that they can talk about outside of class? Or when there is a special event day or something special we're doing in class around the game, can they count on that to be a positive and not a negative one, right? They don't want to hear about how somebody got pwned, right? Or how negative something was, right? Can it be a positive interaction? For my explorers, do my students feel like they have a choice about how they're going to play the game? Do they have meaningful choices about how their characters are going to be expressed? Do my characters feel encouraged to be creative? Right? If a student comes to me and said, hey, I was looking at this badge, and you asked us to take a picture that was on school premise, but I decided not to do it on the school property, specifically because I have this really cool thing in my backyard, and it made the picture cooler. Do they believe that their teacher, their game master, right, is going to make an allowance for them to make a cool choice? Or are you going to be the kind of person who's like very strict to the rules? Right? Are you going to be open to them sort of playing with or rewarding of that, right? I know that for myself, when I'm building RPG games for my students, I try to hide in certain badges or in certain quests little side things that they can do that will take more time for them, but they might be able to get a cool item or a cool bonus. And so they're rewarded for following inquiry. They're rewarded for trying something new, right? If you play D&D, the 0.5 edition, right, there's inspiration points that you can give as a DM to characters who make choices that are particularly creative. So can you give inspiration, or can you give something when someone does something that's really creative and reward that choice? Finally, do students believe that their creativity will be rewarded and displayed? Okay, so not just, did I get my point of inspiration? Is everybody else in the class going to know that I was really creative? Because I was really creative. And I want everyone to know that I made a cool choice, and I want other people to try to make cool choices with me. I want to find my tribe. I want to find that group of people who really think differently and think the way that I do. So, I'd like to take a minute to do some questions. I think we have, let me check the time. Oh yeah, we're golden, guys. So we have about like 5-10 minutes for questions if anyone has them. Otherwise, you can keep in touch with me and sort of see what's going on in my classroom, what some of that gamification looks like by following me on Twitter. It's at Allison K Teaches. My email is up there. Please feel welcome to email me anytime about questions that are related to Bartle's taxonomy, related to the quiz, related to how to gamify something, or include that in your classes. I'm also a co-host on the Cyber Sisters podcast with Emily Sattler. She is doing a ton of stuff with Nearpod here and with Google, so she's a really cool human. But if you would love to hear us talk about what our cyber classrooms look like and how we're interpreting a lot of this into some digital environments, some digital tools, that's a great place to find it. So if there are any questions that you would like to ask, I am absolutely open. But otherwise, thank you guys so much for coming. I really appreciate it. And yeah, that's it.
Teacher at cyber school, and I'm really curious, what are your biggest tips or hints on how to incorporate these things in an online environment?
Oh, very good question. So there are a couple of things that you can do to think about online environments in particular. In some ways, you're at an advantage because students are used to sitting down to a computer to play a game. And so if you give them a resource like a Google Slides or a Nearpod or something like that, and you tell them it's a game and you make it look gamey, right? Like you change some fonts, you make some backdrops and stuff, they're gonna be really excited about it. I do 3 kinds of gamified units. I believe in the house cup model, the badging model, and then the RPG. So for me, I will start my beginning of the year with a house cup model. And what I do is I break the different sections of my class, and you can do this, I'm not sure what your sort of course load looks like, right? But break the students into different groups, find some sort of public display, whether that's your class announcements boards, or if you have a class website, whatever it is that you use to communicate with students. And you can use that space as a way to show points going up, points going down, make sure that students feel like they can interact. So for example, I use a lot of things that are sort of items that allow students to be able to steal points or use sort of a blue shell and knock off whoever's in first place, things like that, that make it feel very interactive. Because when students aren't in the classroom to sort of see the other student be like, oh man, I can't believe, or yeah, that's great, you want to make sure that your virtual space allows for celebration. For things like badging, Nearpod is really, really good because what you can do is put an entire badge's worth of activities into the Nearpod. It's very easy to see who finished it and completed it with fidelity, and then you can post that information. For the most part, my badges are all optional. They're things that I will occasionally give students time to do as an extension activity, but it's all outside of class. For example, I do a poetry unit that's all badged, so you can earn the Emily Dickinson badge or the Edgar Allan Poe badge. They all love that one because it's creepy, right? Like you do creepy music in the background, you can but what I'm asking them really to do is to read and annotate poems in order to earn that badge, right? Extra poems by that author. And you can stack them. Stacking them is a great way to sort of motivate students to do something difficult. So for example, I might have Edgar Allan Poe and Emily Dickinson and Longfellow, and Longfellow's a little dense, but if I offer a special badge for everyone who completes all 3, the American Authors badge, suddenly they might be motivated to do that one that they wouldn't have been motivated to do otherwise. So allow your badges to sort of stack. For RPG, I look for novels for the most part. So if you have any really long texts or even short stories, find a way to incorporate what the students are doing in their game to what they're reading. So for example, in my one that was specific to The Hobbit, the students all played as Dane's company, which if you've read the book, is the company that comes right at the end of the book. They're like the cousins of Thorin. And so as the students are reading the book, as they normally would, at the very end, right, they're completing activities where they're having read the book, helps their characters to make decisions. You can also use this for group work. So for example, I broke my groups into characters, sort of classes for the book. So I had like my scouts, and then I had my characters who were like my fighters, and then I had my characters who were my healers and my resource management characters. And each of those were groups that had different group work to do, but I was building those in based on literacy elements. So for example, my scouts were the students who like to read ahead, right? They didn't have too many problems with literacy. So how can I let them read ahead in a controlled environment and then bring information back to the rest of the party in the form of writing different things? So really when you're thinking about a cyber classroom, think about how are you grouping students together and making sure that they feel like they're a part of a group or part of an experience. Where are you displaying their achievements, their map, that information? And usually, if you don't have inside of whatever your learning management system is, use a Google site. It's free. You can link it to whatever it is that you have at your school, and you can make something in there. Nearpods and things like that that are self-paced are really great to create those kind of individual environments that a student can relate to. So those would be the big tips, are making sure that they feel like they're a part of something, using something that they can move through at their own pace, and just sort of finding a way to overlay it with your curriculum. You're welcome. Anyone else? Yeah.
Do you have a favorite, like, gamified 101? I don't know how to work.
So, yes and no. I am actually part of a group, some of my friends are here, yay, which is called Gamify Ed. We're doing a talk that is at 4:45 that takes you through levels 1 to 5 of how to gamify a unit. So come see us. If you don't come see us, tweet at me and I'll send you some materials. It'll be okay. but come to see us because we're fun. And that will take you through, if you're looking at this and saying this is like so much, I just want to start with like the basics. There are some fantastic ideas about how to gamify a lesson, right? Or a week's worth of lessons if you're not up to gamifying units. Kim is back there. She's got a whole gamified year, man. Like I'm like one level below her. So, so it really is a range. Our site also has a lot of 101 materials, of books that you can read and things like that to sort of move you through in materials. So I would point us to us. Yeah. Yes, absolutely. If you like tweet at me, I'll hook you up with some stuff. So yeah, no problem. If I do with my students, going once, going twice, sold to the highest bidder. All right. Thank you guys so much for coming. If you need anything, please always reach out. And thank you so much for your time. Good for you, girl. Let me tell you. The tall ones is a good transition. So, yeah. Yes. Wow. They're fantastic. Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, excellent. Listen, super good. So
I might use the wizard and better.
Yeah. I have some resources for you. For like, if it, when you're that old, they like it to look a certain way. And so if you have materials that really make it look legit, they'll take it sort of more seriously. And I have some people who do it at like the higher end level that I can try to get you connected with too. So yeah, that's the hard. Yeah, great. Thank you, darling. I appreciate it. Hi.
My name's Joe.
Nice to meet you.
My dissertation
I need to keep telling myself that. That's definitely when we go to that.
I'm going to be connecting with other people.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll probably go to Alright.
You've heard of the
See ya.
the Institute of Play.
You bet you.
Okay,
You
so
bet you.
I went to like one of their trainings for social studies teachers on how to break the and I was very limited in my district. Other people, so I'm very limited on my network.
Well, Well, and see, that's why when so Gerald is one of our Gamify Ed guys, like we created it specifically because we're the only one in our district doing it, and you need a community to bounce ideas off of, to talk to people about. So anything that you need, we're happy to connect up.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brent. Hi. Nice to meet you, Zach.
Yeah.
Alright, slightly different.